Hey everyone, welcome to MPOS. I'm your host Nora, and I'm a senior student at Michigan who is deeply passionate about venture capital and entrepreneurship. Today, I'm excited to welcome Lauren Biglow, who will share her insights on startups, venture capital, and teaching in Ross. Lauren is a board member of Michigan Financial Authority, offering cost-efficient public project financing, and she's also managing partner at Growth Capital Network, leading an impact-driven firm supporting innovation and entrepreneurship. At the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business, she teaches finance and advises MBA and master's students. In this episode, Lauren shares her invaluable experiences from her undergrad years at Michigan and what it's like to teach here now as a professor. She also discussed her transition from academia to cleantech industry. Then Lauren generously offered her advice to students and founders. Speaking with Lauren today has been an incredibly great experience, and I hope you guys enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Let's get right into it.
It's really hard to plan for the job you want. What you do is just, get those skill sets along the way that make you invaluable. And he said, "What is your goal here?" I said, "Well, my first goal is to make you look really smart for hiring me."
Thank you so much, Lauren, for being here on this podcast and sharing about your stories in venture capital, entrepreneurship, and your time at Michigan.
Oh, excited to be here.
Yeah. So I would love you to start off by sharing a little bit about yourself.
My name is Lauren Biglow. I'm the managing partner of Growth Capital Network. We're a firm that focuses on innovation and investment programs. We have programs that go across the U.S., Chicago, Michigan, Washington, D.C., New York. I have a background as angel investor. I've got 20 plus companies in my portfolio. Many of them are in Michigan, but again, they span the U.S. I've invested through Wolverine Angels and also on my own. I'm on the board of several funds, Superior Innovations, up through Michigan Tech, on the committee for Bell, Michigan, and then I'm on the Michigan Financial Authority for the Treasury of the state of Michigan. And I think that's probably about enough.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know you did your undergrad in Michigan and you have been teaching in finance in Michigan for about 10 more years. Mm-hmm. What are your insights about Michigan and what are your most vivid memories here?
My undergrad was in economics, and that took me in a number of different directions. It first took me into finance in Washington, but that basis of analytics and data has really formed the foundation for my career. So I credit my time here at U of M with really giving me the start, that launch there. The finance came in a little bit later. About 20 years ago, I started with my first startup called the Cleantech Group. I was the first employee and their managing director. And it was funny because when I reached out to companies and talked about clean tech, they thought at first I was selling janitorial supplies because they didn't know the term. And so we had cleantech.com, we created an entire investment thesis, and it was my work in sustainability and finance through Cleantech Group and then through New Energy Finance that gave me my basis in finance. And so when I was with the Cleantech Group, I started on the Herb Institute Advisory Board. At the time, it was actually Kemp and was becoming Herb. It was becoming in the endowed chairs and the institute. And so it was a sustainability MBA. And it was a 1-year degree at the School of Sustainability and a 2-year MBA. And so I was on that board for nearly 17 years, which really opened a lot of opportunities for me. I had a number of students as interns. I mentored a number of students and still stay in contact with a number of them. So that the Herb Institute in particular was really impactful for me, engaging at the University of Michigan. Another one, I had been a clean tech advisor on the Zell Fund for a number of years. It was called the Frankel Fund back in the day, and then it switched over to the Zell Fund. And up until a few years ago, for about 10 years, I was one of the clean tech advisors there. And that was a great experience, working with the students, helping them do due diligence around their investment opportunities, looking at their portfolio, helping them understand term sheets, the different aspects of venture capital and early stage investment. So that's been great in terms of engaging with those aspects of University of Michigan.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love your passion in the sustainability and cleantech area. That's something like we both passionate about too. And you mentioned you did your undergrad in economics here, but later on you just choose to pursue a doctorate in anthropology. What inspired that transition in your academic focus?
I had a health crisis, and I thought if I was not going to be on the planet much longer, that I was going to do exactly what I wanted to do. And although I'd never taken an anthro class as an undergrad, I came back to Michigan, did some non-candidate for degree classes, worked in some labs, and just had an incredible experience as an archaeologist. And so I ended up at Northwestern. Michigan doesn't let anybody who has an undergrad go into their PhD programs for anthropology. So I ended up at Northwestern on a National Science Foundation fellowship and came back here actually in my third year because the Big Ten Consortium, you can take classes in your doctoral work at any of the Big Ten universities. So I came back here in my third year, had my lab up at the museum, and just stayed. And so met the founder of the cleantech group that way. It was an interesting set of circumstances, but when I was working on my doctoral lab work, I looked at what academia has, and the business world was just more intriguing to me. So I'd seen both sides of the fence, and I chose to hop back over into the business world, which I'd been in before I went into my doctoral program.
Do you think in some way your anthropology degree helped you with your understanding about business world?
Oh, deeply. I use my anthropological bases, so my data research, my quantitative skills, my qualitative skills. So running focus groups, running evaluations, understanding different groups of people within business. So venture is incredibly different from structured finance. The personality traits that you need for each are very, very different. The risk-taking, people's appetite for hard work. I mean, there are people who jump out of the corporate world into the startup world not realizing that as founder of a company, you do everything. You know, you go to the post office or FedEx, and you buy the groceries for the office, and you keep people's morale up. And it's not a 40-hour week. You don't get to check out at 5 o'clock. If you're in startup world, you're working Sunday nights, you're working Saturday mornings. When we first joined cleantech group, I remember laughing because I was talking to a chief of staff for Governor Rendell, who was at that point governor of Pennsylvania. It's a Sunday morning, 9 o'clock, his kids are in the background, and we're like, we have work to do. It's just what you do. And so it's that personality, those archetypes have really helped me through business, and also the data work that I did. Doctoral data set was 55,000 lines of code with 35 variables, which, in the early, 20 years ago, I would just, hit sort on my Excel spreadsheet and walk away. Because it'd take 20 minutes. It'd do it, but it'd take 20 minutes for it to do it. And now you can, you throw it up on a Google sheet and you're done. So, it's very different world, but the tenets of, interestingly enough, economics and anthropology really resonate with each other to help me in business.
I love that combination. I know you have a long-term passion for entrepreneurship, and in your earlier career stage, you have been working on the advisory board of different startups. So how does it look like to work with those companies and to guide them? And how does this help you to enhance your understanding about the startup ecosystem?
Well, there's a whole range. So there's startup founders that I can help up to a certain point with my networks and my knowledge, and then once they get to a really big institutional round, they are in a different echelon, and I'm totally happy. It's kind of like a junior high school teacher or high school teacher for somebody in college. I know my sweet spot, and I try to lean into that. And so I have startup founders who are fantastic, and you put the money into them, they're passionate, they know what they're doing, they're engaged, and you just kind of let them run. And I have other startup founders where it's just way more hands-on. One of the best things in business is to know what you don't know, and to hire people who are really smart to do what you don't do well. And there's a cachet about being an early stage founder. And so some people are reticent to bring in other people to help them. They think it dims the glow. But the reality is it really just helps you expand the company. Bringing more skilled people to the table expands kind of that pie of credibility, experience, and a lot of times gravitas and network. So, that's where anthropology comes into helpful as well. But you see the full range. And so there are people in my portfolio who I've just simply co-invested with friends and put money into. But there are people in my portfolio, founders who I deeply care for. I know their kids, we do barbecues at their house, we go to concerts. It's one of those pieces as an angel investor, the risk is so high that you can expect an investment from one or two of your other portfolio companies, but it's very much about the relationship that you're having with the founders. Where you can add value, where your money adds value, where my experience, my network adds value. And so it's been a great experience for the most part. We've had a couple companies that, because of regulations, because of kind of economic sea changes, they withered on the vine from no fault of their founders. And so, you toss those in the lost column and you move on. Life is too short to hold grudges or have ill will for people. At the end of the day, it's just money. You can make more.
Yeah.
So,
what are your favorite businesses that you have worked with? Can you give us some examples?
Sure. The founder I was talking about, who you just get Justin up and running and you just get out of his way, is a Detroit-based company called Bloomscape. And it's a plant delivery company. We launched he started in 2017, we launched in 2018. And he's now chairman of the board, he's no longer CEO, but the business is still thriving. And at some point, we're hoping for an exit. So Justin's on to his next company, which I think I'm under NDA about, so I can't discuss right now. But it's in the same plant ag space. And I invested in that as well. I had a post-it on my wall that said no more angel investments. And then he told me he was starting a new company. And I was like, okay, there's exceptions to every rule. Another company that I've really enjoyed working with, I met a young woman, I want to say 2017 or 2018. Her name is Yalitza Jean Charles, and she has a company that I have absolutely no background in. She's a business to consumer company. It's called Healthy Roots Dolls, and it's all about representation. And she's actually started with one doll named Zoe, and now she's got Guyana and Marisol. So they're dolls that have different tones of skin color, but they also have hair that is curly and that the girls can do box braids and different styles for it. And so I grew up in New York in a very multicultural neighborhood, and so I watched my friends not have representation growing up. And so when I heard Yalitza's thesis and saw her product, I was like, oh, I'm in on this. Just because you want to support a founder who is trying to change the world for little kids. And so those are the things that touch me. With Justin, I knew that whatever he did would be a strong business. He and I had worked on a project together, worked really well. His work was impeccable. And with Yalitza, I never met her before, but her story really resonated with me. We're friends. We'll go to concerts or brunch or something. And it's something where, particularly in diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's something that I want to address in my investing. And so I can do charitable donations, or I can support companies that are going to have a broad change as well. So
yeah, definitely appreciate your involvement in the DEI and how you find those startups through your friend circle or your life. And I also wonder, as an angel investor, what kind of startups do you like to back, and what kind of common characteristics of the founders you are looking for?
So investing's very much like a long-term relationship. And so I giggle a little bit because I have an investment thesis and I don't stick to it. So I enjoy putting money into software companies, technology-based companies in healthcare. My brother's an MD. Some of the other groups that I co-invest with are very deeply skilled in the med health, digital health, and med device space. Mm-hmm. So I'll co-invest with them. So I have a thesis around software, energy, sustainability, but it's, for me, at the end of the day, it's really about growing companies and backing good founders. And so if I find an amazing sensor company that's working on, working with wind turbines or solar fields, I'll dig into it. But if I don't find a resonance with the founders, mm-hmm. if it's just something that's just gonna be cutting a check and nothing more, it's not as interesting to me. Yeah. So it's really around software, sustainability, and clean tech, but if you looked at my portfolio, it's only, that core thesis is probably only about a third of my portfolio.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you also mentioned you are the first employee of cleantech group and later new energy finance. So you must have a lot of perspectives on new clean tech industry. Can you share some of your observations of the evolution of this industry and things that have remained over time?
Sure. So I think I signed my offer letter nearly 20 years ago, because I joined the first week of February in 2004. Keith Robb was a full-time founder, and Nick Parker was slightly part-time chairman. And as I was saying before, nobody knew what clean tech was. The entrepreneurs didn't know. It was a very small group. My first conference was 350 investors. The Women in Clean Tech group was literally 7 ladies in the bathroom at our first conference. And we really grew from there. The great thing about the early days was it was a really close-knit community that co-invested and trusted each other and would share deal flow and share intelligence. And they didn't tell you it was triple bottom line, that it was environmental, social, and business, because that really wouldn't go over well. But their internal rate of return that they were going for was going to be at par with other investors. And what those early pioneers did, a number of these different investment firms, they really de-risked the space for a lot of the other investors to come in. So early 2006, George Bush, in his State of the Union, talks about being addicted to oil. All of a sudden, clean tech was the place to be. And what had happened with these earlier funds is they had proven out the thesis. Also, one of the key pieces was in 2005, the state treasurer for the state of California mandated that their biggest pension funds, which are worth, at that point, they were worth like $250 billion, CalPERS and CalSTRS, that they should put some percentage of their high-risk investments into clean tech. And so all of a sudden there was money where they had been really scraping before. So the funds that were established did really well, like hired my students, the portfolio companies the companies that we brought into the clean tech group, they invested in those companies. And so we saw this huge bubble occur, and it happened really fast. But then the US recession hit. And in 2008, I had just joined New Energy Finance in London, and our development team would reach out to, we had a weekly newsletter of intelligence and data that was going out, and all of a sudden, like an entire team at Credit Suisse would be gone. And we'd already lost Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers, and so it was really difficult watching colleagues that had moved from venture into banking and then just lost their jobs. We watched the carbon markets in Europe really downgrade. The carbon market that was here in the US blew up. It just didn't exist anymore. And so those were really hard days. So I was with New Energy Finance until right before they sold to Bloomberg. I had come back to Michigan, and I had a doctorate I needed to finish, and then I also wanted to start my own fund and my own firm. And so that's what I did. Finished my doctorate, started Growth Capital Network, and have watched as the space here in Michigan, the renewable and clean energy space, has really burgeoned. I think when we met, I talked about, I'm board chair of an organization called the Michigan Energy Innovation Business Council. Mm-hmm. And I was president of it, a dozen years ago. And we brought on Dan Screps, who is now the chairman of the Public Service Commission here, and Lisa Clark, and now we've got a president named Laura Sherman. And in these 12 years, we've grown the organization from 20 small businesses to 150 members, huge impact on the state of Michigan, on policy. Laura Sherman is a savant in terms of her knowledge of policy and regulatory pieces at Michigan. She has her PhD in environmental science from Michigan, so she bleeds maize and blue as well. But watching not only the growth of sustainability nationally, but watching it in the state of Michigan has been just amazing for me. Watching the impact on my state, watching the job growth, the investment, the opportunity for clean energy to come in a larger percentage onto our grid, both through DTE and consumers. That's been amazing to watch.
I think that's really impressive because in our generation, we also receive a lot of education with clean energy. We oversee this development, and many of us really want to go to renewable energy sector after they graduate. So we also want to hear more about your own company, Growth Capital Network. Like, how do you want to start that company? And you mentioned there are a lot of programs. So what are those programs, and where is the opportunity?
So I really hope that there's a lot more jobs in renewables going forward, and I hope you guys are able to be employed in the sector. Growth Capital Network, we've run a number. So the company it's our 14th year, and some of the blasts from the past, we ran a thing called the Accelerate Michigan Innovation Competition from 2010 through 2016, and that was $1 million business competition. And so there's a company here in Ann Arbor that we gave a student award to in 2012, and then a $500,000 check to in 2014 called SkySpecs. And they do data analytics and inspection for infrastructure. They started as a drone company that was inspecting wind turbines and dams, and so getting up into those nooks and crannies with the drones. And so they've moved away from creating the drones and doing those into more of a data and analytics company. So they're now in more than 30 countries. I think they've got 200 staff here, or they have 200 staff globally, but they've raised more than $120 million. With the Accelerate Michigan competition, we really put a number of companies on the map, and that was all sectors. Clean energy, transportation, and mobility were some of the sectors, so we watched a number of successes there. There was another program that was a offsite for scientists, for university researchers, that was a 5-day offsite that I ran with Huron River Ventures, Ryan Waddington and Tim Strait, that we teach university researchers how to commercialize technology. And it talked to them about venture capital, about creating the business, HR issues, financial issues, how to structure pieces. And I think kind of threaded through was there are a lot of brilliant scientists out there, but business is a different animal. There are people who can run a physics lab and be a Nobel laureate, but in terms of reading a balance sheet or pulling your monthly financials, you're just not that good. And so part of it was taking them through the full road of what the first 2 or 3 years of the company was going to be. And we made some great friends there. And it was really funny. There are some friendships that have lasted, the 12, 13 years since we did that. So we did it at Grand Valley, we did it at Oakland University, and down at Next Energy. So it was a great run, and then we rolled that program into a thing that's called I-Corps, the Innovation Corps. It's through National Science Foundation. So we were happy with the home that landed. We've run programs for the Michigan Translational Research and Commercialization, it's called MTRAC. So for a number of years, we stood that up and administered that program. Transportation, Advanced Materials, and Agriculture at Michigan State, University of Michigan, and Michigan Tech. I'm trying to think, we've done so many programs. We've done other innovation programs that were not technology. We did one for the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation that was $1 million competition for local nonprofits that served vulnerable seniors and their caregivers. And so it was a stretch, but we really put our creative juices into that one and made a huge impact. And so the theme for me is it interesting? Can we be creative in the project? And will it impact our community? And so, some of my proudest moments were when companies would come up to me after Accelerator, after Green Tea, and say, that was a game changer for me. I got these pieces out of it, and it transformed our business, it transformed our path. And so, I'm not teaching every piece of this. I'm not, doing, but it's a community that we can convene and create these platforms with, and that I think is really impactful.
I really love the part about that you're making impact and support those startup founders. I think the relationship between you and those startup founders are more like a friends that support each other, and that might be the reason why you're so successful right now. How do you think about such kind of relationship with those founders?
Oh, I really enjoy them. I enjoy them as people. I am impressed by their creativity all the time. They do things I can't do. One of the funnier pieces for a lot of startup founders is I'm a bit of a night owl. So if somebody texts me at midnight, they're staring at the ceiling, they can't figure this thing out, or they're having a heck of a time with a particular employee, I am always awake at midnight. And so it's just, I'm not one of those morning people, those perky, happy morning people. But, I'm the person that when you're staring at the ceiling, you can call, and nothing's off limits. I don't judge people for being in a panic. I mean, life has its ups and downs. There's times that you're on the top of the world and opportunity is coming at you and it's working, and there are times that the economy falters and your venture capitalists leave you at the altar. People who had committed, and a friend who is a venture capitalist used to say, the deal's not done till the money's in the bank. Until it's liquid, and everything's signed, it's not done. And so there's been a lot of times where I've watched companies falter, and you just need to be supportive to get them to their next success. And I tend to be pretty good at that. I'm not an eternal optimist, but I'm definitely somebody who can find creative solutions, and particularly around funding and financing. There's always someplace else that's looking to support a founder. And it might be in-state, and it might not be. It might be some federal programs. It might be, for the women-led businesses, there are female-focused loan funds, and these have only kind of really popped up in the last 5 years. But, exposing your founders to those opportunities and those networks is huge. It can really go far in terms of the success of a company. So, I like the people that I fund.
Yeah.
So if I didn't, it'd just be kind of sterile and business-like, and that's, I don't know, this just candidly too boring for me.
It seems like you're always give something first, and then the reward will come back. And
I don't do quid pro quo. So we're in the 11th year teaching Finance 583. 17 of my students have been hired by some of the guest speakers. We go to dinner beforehand, sometimes meet with the Energy Club. Outside of class, I'll link up my students with startups. And I'll have students come back to me after 6-7 years. Oh, hey, I was in your class in 2016. I'm doing XYZ. Can you have a conversation? I'm always like, they're great people. I'll go back and kind of look at my comments in terms of their grades and be like, oh, okay, cool, I remember this person. But I'll always give a hand because then the next person asks them for help, they'll give a hand.
Mm-hmm.
And to be really candid, when I first got out of school and it was in my first jobs, there was no mentorship. There were no programs for women in business. And so to be able to have it so that people have different struggles, everybody's gonna have struggles in their business and their career, and it's gonna be a different set. But hopefully they're not gonna be the ones that I dealt with. And you know, I always in the 80s and 90s appreciated the women who had clear cut it for me beforehand. You know, the ladies in my family were teachers, social workers, and administrative assistants. I mean, that's what you did. There were no other opportunities. And so it's really important to me to give a leg up to the women and the students here at Michigan to help them get ahead.
I really like it. Like more and more women are trying to help each other right now. Girls help girls, right? And I think the last question is, you also work as the advisor for Michigan Treasury Department right now. Mm-hmm. So what's like the difference between working in public sector and private sector?
Yeah, I'm on the Michigan Financial Authority, and so we do the public side. As a matter of fact, because of the snow, we missed a meeting this morning, but we approve a lot of the bond offerings. And so refinancing bonds for schools or hospitals, and it's very structured. It is very formal. We couldn't have the meeting this morning on Zoom. Despite kind of the forecast, they rescheduled it. We had to be there physically in person. Mm-hmm. And so the flexibility that the public sector can have is different than that of the private sector. But I'll tell you, the positions, the jobs that are over there, I have students who are interested in managing $50 million in a venture fund, and I'm like, you can manage millions, if not billions, at Treasury. You know, if you go into state finance or the U.S. Department of Treasury, you can be working with a fund that's investing billions of dollars a year. So I really encourage my students in finance to take a look at that, because I think there's opportunities, and I also see a significant amount of women thriving in these treasuries in public service. And so, you know, whereas the formality and the process nature of public service might not be for everybody, I think it's always worth a good look, particularly when you're at the beginning of your career.
That's amazing, and that's what we want to like talk about next part is
Mm-hmm.
your general advice for those students, maybe especially those women students, because you're a women leader. Like, can you give 3 key advice for them in any area?
Sure. One of which is failure is never final. Mm-hmm. You know, you go into a job, you have an awful boss, you know, it's pretty rare that your first job is going to be great, period. But you want to look at, what am I learning? What can I take away from this? What skills can I develop? And so for every kind of ratty, boring job, try to develop skill sets for your next job. And I am not a person who has a like 3, 5, 10-year plan. I'm a little bit more fluid than that. So I would say take some risks. One of the factoids that I found most interesting is valedictorians and salutatorians from high school were not as successful as the B and C students. And I think part of it was that, at least they postulated in this research, is that the salutatorians and valedictorians got really good at giving exactly what was needed. But the B and C students had to be more creative about their offerings, because, you know, maybe they couldn't figure out physics or chemistry or something. And so they took more risks, and they got used to failing a little bit more. And that's something that I would encourage in people. And it's hard to take it when that 2x4 hits you on the side of the head. But there's always another job out there. There's always other people who will employ you, who will find you valuable. And so part of it in the career search is just don't be discouraged. And the other piece is your job isn't final. I have worked in the wine business. I have worked as an archaeologist. I have worked in clean technology. I have worked with philanthropy. You know, I do a ton of volunteer work. I mean, any one of those aspects is its own career. For me, it helps because I get bored easy, and so, the variety of pieces that I dig into really serve me. But at any point, if I want to jump into the renewables world, I can. If I want to jump back into philanthropy, I can. And so having varied experiences, it's not a bad thing. And if you want to move from, say, the healthcare sector into sustainability or vice versa, sometimes you need to take a position that's lower than what you were at before. Got to take a step back, you've got to do some learning. Sometimes it's another degree. But, you've got a 40 or 50-year time frame for a career. That's a lot of time. You can pack a lot of stuff into that. And, I think probably my third bullet is you got to find time to have some fun in all this. Because, grad school's a grind, and, you're doing prelims for your doctorate and stuff like that. And so you don't see the light of day for 6 months. But when that's done, you have to, life is about enjoyment and fun and nature and other people. Or maybe it's for other people about books and solitude. But whatever it is that serves you, make sure that you find some integrated along with your work. Because seriously, all work and no play makes people really dull.
I think that's really amazing. Those advice can actually give people a lot of power, especially in this tough job market right now. I think a lot of people will be encouraged by those three pieces.
Yeah, when I graduated from Michigan, it was a recession. And people who were straight A honor students that I was coming out with were, getting a job managing a Gap store in a mall. And you figure it out. They took those skills, the managerial skills, they moved up, they went into different corporates, they did parallel moves, and so you will always find a way to get to where you need to be. The careers that you guys are looking at, you think about 2044, the career you're going to be in there probably doesn't exist right now. And so it's really hard to plan for the job you want. What you do is just, get those skill sets along the way that make you invaluable, that make, years ago for the Accelerate Michigan project, a gentleman named Mike Finney, who was heading up Ann Arbor Spark at the time, hired me. And he said, "What is your goal here?" I said, "Well, my first goal is to make you look really smart for hiring me." And he just laughed, and I thought, okay, but it is, right? You want him to look back all the time and be like, "Oh, we're so glad we had her at the helm. We're so glad we gave that project to her." Because that team just killed it. So
yeah, and as you mentioned, career is long. In 40, 50 years, you can literally do anything. You just need to be patient and figure out the way path to get it.
Yeah, and also, have the courage when you get into kind of those career cul-de-sacs where you're like, okay, there is nothing here that I really want. If you've been there 2 or 3 years, jump. Sometimes the net's going to appear, sometimes the net's not going to appear. Sometimes you're going to hit the rocks and it's going to be okay. You'll get up. And again, not like it's not going to sting, but focus on what's more important to you.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
More often than not, it's got nothing to do with your job.
Yeah. Well, I think we arrived at the last part of our episode today. There are 3 rapid fire questions we're going to ask you. It's going to be fun.
Sounds great.
Yeah. So the first one is, what is your favorite place in U of M?
What is my favorite place at U of M? Peony Garden.
Agreed. Second one is, what's your favorite book?
Wow. Oh gosh. There's so many thousands of books in my house.
Or a book that you recently read you really liked?
I reread A Separate Peace. It was one of my favorite books as a teenager, and over Christmas when I was unpacking some books, it popped up, and so A Separate Peace. It just about 2 boys in a boarding school, but it was a really intriguing book.
Love that. The last one is, what's your favorite movie?
Well, I have to admit, so my favorite G-rated movie is Princess Bride. I watched it with tons of my nieces and nephews and lots of little kids. On the other side, probably Pulp Fiction, Usual Suspects. more kind of darker genre, but those are my faves.
All right, that's wonderful. That's the end of this episode. We really, really appreciate your time being here today, Lauren. And thank you so much for sharing all those advice and your life experience. It's been super helpful to us.